Welcome to my official 2023 NFL Mock Draft 1.0. In today's video, we'll be going through all 31 picks, no trades. We're going to try to make it as smooth as possible today. But if you do enjoy it and you want to see a second installment of these mock drafts, let me know. I can do one with trades. We still have a few weeks before the draft. Plenty of time to come up with some more mock drafts. But for today, no trades. But before we get into it, if you are new to the channel, be sure to subscribe, drop a like on the video. But with all that being said, the first pick in the draft is the Carolina Panthers. They traded up from the number 9 spot with the Chicago Bears. And there's been a lot of talk really the past week about who they're going to select with that pick. I'm still pretty confident it is going to be CJ Stroud. He's really been the favorite, in my opinion, from the start. As soon as the Panthers traded up from number 9, he was like minus 500, maybe more, to be the number 1 overall pick. And now all of a sudden, Bryce Young has crept up a little bit. I think he's now actually the favorite. I'm not buying that. I think CJ Stroud is going to be the number 1 overall pick. He fits what Frank Reich likes to do. Pocket passer, runs his scheme pretty well. I think he's going to be the number 1 overall pick. And that means the Texans are going to take who the Panthers don't. And in this scenario, and the one that I see happening in real life, that is going to be Bryce Young. Many people think he has the highest ceiling of this draft class, but he also has some risk with his size. How will he hold up at the next level? That's pretty interesting. But I think Bryce Young is the pick at number 2. I think both of the top quarterbacks will be going pick 1, pick number 2. Not really a debate about it in my mind. And then here at number 3 is really where I see the draft starting with the Arizona Cardinals. If I was doing a mock draft with trades, I do think that this could be a trade down spot for the Cardinals. But I don't know. It's pretty interesting. They could maybe trade back with some quarterback needy team. Maybe the Colts want to ensure that they get Anthony Richardson or Will Levis, whoever they deem as the next best quarterback on the board. But I think the Cardinals could also very well make the pick here. And I think that it is going to be Will Anderson Jr. out of Alabama. I think before all of the off-the-field stuff happened for Jalen Carter, it was kind of a 50-50 on who was going to be the number 3 overall pick. But now with all the risk of the off-field concerns for Carter, I think it's pretty clearly going to be Will Anderson. Maybe Tyree Wilson gets some acknowledgement, but I do think Will Anderson has the highest floor between him and Wilson. I think he's the safest pick at number 3, and I think that's who the Cardinals end up going with that pick. And then here at number 4 is really interesting. For a while, I really liked Will Levis here at the number 4 spot for the Colts. But as things have kind of progressed, I've made a video on Anthony Richardson and his sudden rise the past few weeks up, the mock draft boards, and how much teams are really excited to draft him. And I do think that he does slide in here at number 4 to the Indianapolis Colts. They desperately need a young quarterback. They've done that veteran route for multiple years now. Matt Ryan, Phillip Rivers, Carson Wentz. They definitely need some youth, some quarterback to build around. And I do think it's Anthony Richardson. Will Levis versus Anthony Richardson is very intriguing to me. But I do think that they're pretty similar. I mean, I just think Richardson he's bigger, stronger, faster. He's also younger. He has more time to develop, where Levis, he does have some great tools, but I do not think that, he has as high of a ceiling as Richardson. And when you're selecting a quarterback number 4 overall, and you're kind of drafting him based off those traits, you should draft the one that has, the better of the two. And I believe that is Anthony Richardson. And then here at number 5 for the Seahawks, I think this is another interesting pick. Can Jalen Carter potentially go here? Can maybe Tyree Wilson go here? I've seen a lot of different things mocked for the Seahawks, but I do think that they're going to take an edge rusher. They definitely desperately need help on their defensive line. And I do think that the pick here is Tyree Wilson. I do not think that the Seahawks are a type of team to take a risk with a player like Jalen Carter. I just don't really see that happening. I think Tyree Wilson is the pick for them. He's got a lot of tools to develop. Seahawks are usually pretty good at developing defensive linemen as well. And he's got a lot of nice traits. And I think he's going to be the pick to round out the top 5 for my mock draft. And then we're here at number 6 for the Lions. And Jalen Carter is really interesting here. I really could see Jalen Carter going number 6 to the Lions. They definitely need some help on their defensive line. Aiden Hutchinson last year, but he's really all they kind of got. He's their only stud they got on their defensive line. They definitely need some more help there. So I could see Jalen Carter, if the Lions are interested in taking a little bit of a risk, Carter's perfect. But they also, just a couple days ago, traded away Jeff Okudah their former number 3 overall pick from Ohio State. And I think they're going to look to replace him. I mean, I know that they went out and got Cam Sutton. They have some decent pieces in the secondary, but it was one of the worst in all of football last year. I know they got some pieces, CJ Gardner-Johnson as well, but I think you need another cornerback, definitely cornerback 1 to help out that team. And I think that's going to be Devin Witherspoon. I think he has probably the highest ceiling in the draft. I think he's almost the most ready to come in and play. And I think that he's going to fit really nicely with what the Lions need in their secondary. So they kind of have a completely revamped unit now. You got 2 or 3 new corners. You got a new safety. I think things are looking a lot better for their defense, and they definitely should take a step next year. And the Lions still have a pick, number 18. They could easily go out and get another defensive lineman to help out. I think you take the best corner on the board, especially with their latest trade. And now we find ourselves at number 7. And I just think this is hilarious because I think this really could end up happening. Jalen Carter, he's here at number 7 for the Raiders. And as we know from the Raiders, they're not shy about taking, people that have some off-the-field issues. They've done it over and over again. I don't think they're going to take Will Levis. There's been a lot of reports that, that they're not really interested in taking the 4th quarterback off the board at number 7. That they're not going to trade up for a guy. I think Jalen Carter is the pick here. Maybe this can turn out really nice for the Raiders because he is projected to be maybe the best player in the entire draft. I mean, he was an absolute monster at Georgia, and then with the off-the-field stuff, push him down the board a little bit. But I think this is a pretty good pick for the Raiders. It has a chance to blow up in their faces, but it also has a chance to be one of the best picks in the draft. I would be worried a little bit about Carter being around the Las Vegas scene. Maybe that throws them off a little bit. But I think overall, a huge high-risk, high-reward pick. And I think the Raiders will do it. And then now we find ourselves at number 8 for the Falcons. And I'm pretty confident in my top 7. I feel like all of those things could happen relatively in a good percentage. Like, I'm pretty confident with my top 7 picks. But number 8 is really, really interesting with the Falcons. I'm not too sure what they're entirely thinking here. I do not think Will Levis is the pick here. I think they're going to ride it out with Desmond Ridder. Wide receiver could be a pick here. They did trade away Calvin Ridley. All they really have now is Drake London and Kyle Pitts. But similar to the Lions, their defense has been one of the worst in the league for a couple years now. And I know they went out for agency. They got a Jesse Bates. They just traded for Jeff Okudah. So they're making some moves on their defense, but they definitely need help still at the edge position. And that is why I think Lucas Van Ness is the pick for them. It seems to be a popular spot for Van Ness to go. I've seen some mock drafts that have him going at the end of the first round. Some even have him going ahead of the Falcons. I think he's definitely a player that could mess up some mock drafts as far as if you're trying to be accurate with them, because it seems like there's not a consensus where he should be picked. But I think number 8 to the Falcons is a pretty good spot for him. And now we're at the Bears, and I think this is where the run on tackles begins to go. The Bears desperately need some help on the offensive line. They went out and got DJ Moore in the trade for the Panthers. They went out and got some more weapons for Justin Fields. And now they need some help on the offensive line. They got Nate Davis, but they didn't get any tackle to really help them out. And I think that's going to be their first pick. Perfect spot, number 9, to get the first tackle off the board. I don't think this is a great tackle class compared to what we've seen in some of the past couple years, but I do think there's some top guys that can be pretty good. And I think they're going to take Paris Johnson Jr., the other Ohio State Buckeye. Maybe him and Justin Fields have a little bit of chemistry with playing for the same college. But I think that's their pick there. I could definitely see Peter Skronsky there, but he's more, I feel like, suited to be a guard. I've seen a lot of people question his arm length and if he's going to be able to play against some of the best top edge rushers with that limited arm length. We'll see how it works out for him, but I think Paris Johnson has a chance to play left tackle or right tackle, play either, be their, I guess, chess piece that they're their cornerstone of their offensive line. I think he's the pick for the Bears at number 9. Now we get to another pretty interesting trade spot with the Philadelphia Eagles. I could definitely see them trading down, but if they do stick with this pick, there's been a lot of chatter. Maybe Bijan Robinson maybe Bijan Robinson is the pick here. They lost Miles Sanders in free agency. Could you imagine a rushing attack of Bijan Robinson, Jalen Hurts, and that Eagles offensive line? That would be pretty disgusting. So I think that could be interesting, but I do not think Bijan is going to go top 10. Howie Roseman is pretty stingy with using those types of picks, his premium, top 10 picks on nothing but really offensive line or defensive line. I think his philosophy really takes into account the trenches. And I think that's going to be what he picks again. And I think it's going to be Peter Skoronski. He's got a chance to be the best offensive lineman, probably the highest floor out of any lineman in this draft. The Eagles lost a lot of pieces this offseason, including a piece on their offensive line. You also have a lot of your key players getting up there in age. Jason Kelce, how long is he going to play? Lane Johnson, he dealt with a lot of injuries last year. They desperately need some help, some more young players to develop on their offensive line. I think Skoronski is the play here for the Eagles if they do decide to pick at number 10. I could definitely see them trading down, but for this mock draft, I think Skoronski at number 10 is the correct play for the Eagles. And then now we find ourselves with the Titans, another very, very interesting pick. Because last year they took a wide receiver in the first round with Treylon Burks. He had an okay season. I don't think it was everything that they dreamed and hoped of, but he had an okay season. And now this year is, do you double dip with wide receivers in the first round? Or do you go with what you probably need most in offensive line? Maybe do you go Will Levis if he's still on the board? There's a lot of different scenarios that I could see the Titans rolling with, but I do think that they go offensive line. I do think that that is probably the thing that they need most. I mean, Derrick Henry's aging. Ryan Tannehill, is he really their long-term option? I don't think the Titans are really necessarily in win-now mode next year. I think it could be kind of a slow rebuild. They got to wait another year to get rid of Tannehill's contract. There's been rumors about trading Derrick Henry. We'll see what happens with them, but I do think that they take a tackle to be kind of just a nice piece on the offensive line to kind of build around, and I do think that is going to be Broderick Jones. And I'm not entirely sure if the Titans would love to pick another Georgia tackle because, of course, they took one a couple years ago. Was a huge buzz, not even in the league anymore. So I don't know if they're going to do that again, but I think Broderick Jones is a very athletic player. So I think he's a solid pick for the Titans. They did get Andre Dillard to be their left tackle, but now I think they need a right tackle, somebody that can also build around a young guy. Broderick Jones, really athletic, really nice player, high ceiling. I think he's the pick for the Titans at number 11. And then we're here for the Texans. And the Texans, we selected Bryce Young for them earlier with the second pick in the draft. And I think their offensive line for a rookie quarterback is actually really good. I think the Texans may have one of the best, if not the best, offensive line in the league. It's really solid. But where they do need help for a rookie quarterback is their weaponry. They need some help with the wide receiver core. And why not go out and get what many people see as the highest floor player, maybe in the entire draft, and that is JSN, Jackson Smith-Njigba. I think the Texans don't even hesitate. Send in the pick as soon as it comes to them. JSN number 12 to the Texans. They get a nice weapon for Bryce Young to throw to a good safety blanket. Slot wide receiver. He may end up being the best slot wide receiver in football. Think of him as like an Amon-Ra St. Brown type of player. And then here at number pick 13, we have the New York Jets. This could be another trade down spot because the three top tackles did go a few picks before them. Paris Johnson, Peter Skoronski, Broderick Jones. Will the Jets be interested in taking the fourth tackle off the board? I guess it depends on their board and who they have ranked. But I think for right now, Darnell Wright is who they're going to take. I think they are interested in him. They do desperately need a right tackle. They have Mekhi Becton. He hasn't really played a ton in his career since they drafted him out of Louisville. He's got a immense potential. He's posted some pictures now of how much weight he's lost. Maybe he's able to stay on the field. But if he's not, and you don't even have a right tackle right now, you definitely need help there. And I think Darnell Wright, he's the best tackle on the board. With these three guys gone, maybe in the real draft scenario, one of these guys fall to them at number 13. But I do think 13 for the Jets is going to be a tackle. And then we find ourselves with the New England Patriots. And I've seen them mocked a lot with offensive linemen. I've even seen potentially Bijan Robinson. There's been some smoke about that. Maybe Bijan Robinson, maybe the Patriots go out and get maybe the best weapon in the draft. But I don't think that's what's going to happen. I think they're actually going to take Christian Gonzalez out of Oregon. I've seen some people have him actually going number 6 to the Lions. But I think Witherspoon, just the more safer prospect. I like what he's got a little bit more as far as talent-wise, what he did at Illinois. So I think Witherspoon goes number 6, and I think that means Gonzalez falls a little bit because there's not a lot of these teams here that need cornerback help. So I do think Gonzalez has a good chance to fall down the board a little bit. And if you have Bill Belichick just staring him in the face, with pick number 14, you get a chance to get a really nice cornerback who tested fantastic at the combine. I think he's going to do it. I've seen a lot of tackles also mocked here. As I mentioned, Anton Harrison may be a potential option. I don't think that they go defensive line. I don't think that they're going to go quarterback. Maybe they trade down and get more picks. But I think for right now, Christian Gonzalez is a really nice luxury pick for the Patriots at number 14. And then we find ourselves here at 15 with the Packers. They're going to be getting rid of Aaron Rodgers. They're going to get some more capital in return. But I think this is finally the year that they do indeed take a weapon. Now they have a young quarterback who hasn't played a ton in Jordan Love. They need help on the outside. They have a lot of young receivers, unproven receivers. They got some good running backs, but they definitely need some more targets on the outside. And I think they're going to take the best receiving tight end on the board in Dalton Kincaid. Seen some people compare him to Travis Kelce. That's, of course, a pretty tough comparison to make. But Kincaid has ridiculous receiving skills. He's not going to do much for you as a blocker, but obviously if you draft him, you're not really too concerned with that. I think he's going to be a very nice chess piece for that offense, Matt LaFleur. I think he's the pick for the Packers at number 15. Maybe they target a Quentin Johnston, a big-bodied receiver. But I think desperately they need a tight end. Robert Tonyan lost in free agency. Dalton Kincaid, number 15. Now here we have the Washington Commanders. They're an interesting team as well. I don't really know who they're going to take. They have a ton of different options they could go. Are they going to go in rebuild mode? They're going to start Sam Howell next year, I believe. So I do not think that Will Levis is a potential Washington Commander. But I do think that they could get some help on their offensive line. But as we've already seen, most of the good tackles are off the board. I don't think they're going to take an interior offensive line here at number 16. I think that's maybe just a little too high to take one of those players. And I still think that they need some help in their secondary. Why not take the guy that's close to the area, kind of like a hometown type of player in Deonte Banks? And I really think this could go one way or the other, because I do think that the Steelers are also going to look for somebody in their secondary. And I think it's going to be Joey Porter Jr. reuniting with his dad. I don't know. I just think that that's a very popular pick, but I could definitely see it happening. They need help in their secondary. His dad coaches there, has familiar there. I think Joey Porter Jr. fits there nicely, but I've also seen a lot of hype for Brian Branch, number 17 for the Steelers. Could they pair him with Minkah Fitzpatrick as their safety duo? That could be really nice. But I think they're going to ultimately decide to take Joey Porter Jr. But I do think if Joey Porter goes to Washington, and then the Steelers are left with Deonte Banks, who's the best corner on the board, or potentially taking Brian Branch, I could see Branch going there easily. But for now, I think Deonte Banks goes to Washington, Joey Porter Jr. to the Steelers. And now we find ourselves with the Detroit Lions at pick number 18. Potential wide receiver could go here. Maybe a tight end if they really like one of those top guys, because they got rid of TJ Hawkinson, which I didn't entirely understand when they did that. I was a pretty big fan of Hawkinson. Then he went to the Vikings, exploded onto the scene. So maybe they go for a tight end, another weapon to help out Jared Goff. They don't really have a ton of help on the outside. But I also think that defensive line is a potential pick here, as I mentioned earlier in the video when I made their first pick. They got him from secondary help, which it was probably their biggest need. And now they need some defensive line help. And I think Elijah Cansey, he's a really interesting player, maybe the most athletic defensive lineman in the draft. I think some people have compared him to Aaron Donald, probably because they both came out of Pittsburgh. They're a little bit undersized for being a defensive tackle, but he's got an insane athleticism for his size, and I think that he could definitely help out that defensive line for the Lions. Pair him with Aiden Hutchinson, and I think you get a pretty good 1-2 punch. And then here we are with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at pick number 19, and I love Will Levis right here. I love it. Maybe the Bucs trade up. I think that's most likely going to happen. I do not think Levis will fall all the way down to pick number 19. Just seems unlikely with how the board has kind of fallen with 3 quarterbacks going in the top 10. I think some team is probably going to jump up for him. Who will that team be? I don't know, but I think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are definitely a player in that. So I think if somehow he did fall all the way down to 19, the Bucs are not going to pass on him. They held him for an interview or a pre-draft meeting today. I think he's the pick for them at number 19. They still have some good pieces. They brought in Baker Mayfield. They still have Kyle Trask. Could they maybe punt this year, get a quarterback next year in a loaded quarterback class? Maybe. But if Will Levis is staring them in the face here at number 19, I think they're going to make the pick. And then here at number 20 for the Seahawks, we addressed their defensive line earlier. I think they still need some help in the interior of their offensive line. See the needs there, guard and center. They really went out and got tackles in last drafts with their premium picks. I think this draft they attack the interior. And why not go out and get the best guard on the board in Osiris Torrance from Florida? I've seen some Seahawks fans getting some reservations about taking a guard at this spot. It doesn't really seem to be a popular pick amongst NFL fans. I mean, of course not. It's kind of an offensive lineman, a guard. You'd really like to see your team go out and get some impact players that you can see on an every downed basis. But I think Osiris Torrance is probably the best pick that they can take here as far as what their needs are. I don't think they need another wide receiver. I've seen that mocked. Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, you're good. Don't waste another first-round pick on a wide receiver at this point. And next, the Los Angeles Chargers. Dolphins' first-round pick forfeited. The Chargers need help at wide receiver. It's been well documented all last season, even this offseason. It's well documented what receiver help that they need. And I think it's going to be Zay Flowers. They need a deep threat. They have Justin Herbert, who may have the strongest arm in the league, and they have him throwing check down after check down after check down. It's got to change. They got Kellen Moore now. I think their offense is going to take a step next season. And why not get another wide receiver now to pair with Mike Williams, Keenan Allen? So now you can stick Keenan Allen in the slot. He's kind of deteriorating just a little bit. His speed, it's decreasing. Quickness, decreasing. Stick him in the slot. Let him run some underneath routes. And put Mike Williams as your X wide receiver. And then you put Zay Flowers as the Z receiver. And I think it's a pretty nice trio of wide receivers for Justin Herbert. And the Chargers offense should really be pretty dynamic next year with what many see as the best deep threat in the draft. Now, the Baltimore Ravens, I'm very curious to see what they do as well. They did just sign Odell Beckham Jr., but is that really enough for the wide receiver core? I don't know. I hope not, because Odell is coming off of 2 ACL tears. He hasn't had 1,000 yards since 2019. Do you really want to rely on him as the only real upgrade for your receiving core from just the past couple of years? I don't think that's smart. But maybe that's their excuse to pass on a wide receiver here and maybe take best defensive lineman on the board, get some help in the secondary. But I think they should do the right thing and get Lamar Jackson another wide receiver. I think the one that fits perfectly for them is Jordan Addison. He's a great separator. I've kind of compared him to Devontae Smith. Very slim guy. He's not going to burn defenses with his deep speed. But he's a solid player. I think he can be a good wide receiver 2 in the league. Run routes really good. Separate. And that's what Lamar Jackson needs. I think Addison with Odell, Rashad Bateman, and Mark Andrews, bro, that's pretty good weaponry. So I think Jordan Addison, the Ravens finally put a halt to their wide receiver questions, concerns, make Lamar Jackson happy, get him another wide receiver. He's the pick there. And then number 23 for the Vikings, I have another wide receiver going here. And I've seen this become a little bit more popular, but I think Quentin Johnston, his fall. Many people saw him as the top wide receiver in this draft, maybe going around the early teen range, maybe like Tennessee. But I think he falls. And I think the Vikings, they got rid of Adam Thielen. All they really have on offense is Justin Jefferson. I'm sorry, I'm not a huge fan of Dalvin Cook. I think he's still an okay running back, not as dynamic as he used to be. I guess they have TJ Hawkinson, but they need another wide receiver. And I think why not go out and get maybe the highest ceiling wide receiver in the entire draft in Quentin Johnston. He can be developed, learn how to run routes a little bit better. Learning from Justin Jefferson could definitely help. He could be a really nice player for them. Pair him with Justin Jefferson, you have a really nice duo of wide receivers. And at pick number 23, I think that's a great value pick. I could see them going defense. They do have a new defensive coordinator in Brian Flores. He does have a very specific scheme where he does ask a lot of his corners. But are you going to reach on Emmanuel Forbes, take him, middle of the first round? I don't know. Maybe Brian Branch is an interesting player. He can take kind of the role of a Harrison Smith. Maybe a defensive lineman. There's still some really good ones on the board. Brian Brees, Nolan Smith. But I think for right now, I do like this kind of run on wide receivers with Flowers, Addison, and then Johnston. And then we find ourselves at pick number 24 with the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I think they're going to go defense. They could go interior offensive line. They did sign Sheriff last offseason, so they did invest pretty good capital in a really good guard last year, but they still need to fill out the other guard spot, still need some help at the center position. So they take a potential interior lineman here. I could see it, and I've seen tight end mocked to them a lot. They did just franchise tag Evan Ingram. Are they really going to pay $10+ million for a tight end and then spend their only first round pick on another tight end? I don't really see that happening. Maybe it does. Maybe I'm wrong. Brian Branch, I really like him here at this spot. But as we get closer to the draft, I really find it unlikely that he falls to 24. I mean, I know that the kind of nickel position on defense has become a little bit undervalued. But when you look at all these teams that need help in their secondary, like Pittsburgh, like the Lions, and then like, for example, the Ravens, the Vikings, are all these teams going to pass on really, really good player? It's interesting. Definitely interesting. You could definitely talk me into having Branch go earlier to one of these guys. But I think for the sake of how the board has kind of fallen for me, I do think Branch at 24 to the Jags would be a really, really nice pick. And now we have the New York Football Giants. They're another team that I don't really have a good sense on what they're looking for. I mean, they did go out and get Darren Waller in free agency. He's kind of their new premium target. But if you look at the wide receiver board, I don't really think there's a guy that you would really want to take with the number 25 pick. Josh Downs, for a while, people were talking about him as being a potential first rounder. That's kind of fallen off a little bit, that hype. He's more seen as a second, maybe mid-second round type of player. Same thing with Nathaniel Dell. So I just don't think that Downs is a great pick here for the Giants. And I could definitely see them going linebacker. You can still get some of the top linebackers on the board. But again, do you really want to invest the number 25 pick in that? I don't know. You do have some other needs on your roster. And I think it's the interior of their offensive line. You really got to figure out now if Daniel Jones can take that next step. They just paid him a ton of money. I think you got to ensure that he stays upright, protected well. And I think Joe Tippmann is going to be my pick here from Wisconsin. Wisconsin routinely pumps out great offensive linemen. It's like a factory. But if it's not Tippmann, I do think that maybe a John Michael Schmitz could go from Minnesota. They have some options at the center position, but I think it's either or. Who do they like more? Who's higher on the draft board? Tippmann, Schmitz. I guess we'll have to wait and see, but I do think offensive linemen for their interior, this is a good spot to take one of those guys, towards the end of the first round. And then here for the Dallas Cowboys, the first running back goes off the board. And this has become increasingly popular. I don't know what the Cowboys would do, man. Like, how could they pass on Bijan Robinson if he's here at number 26? I don't think they can. Jerry Jones passing on a star-studded running back? I don't think he can do it. Now is Ezekiel Elliott gone? They need some more depth at the running back position. They franchise tagged Tony Pollard, but he's coming off of a broken leg. They need some help at the running back position. They really do. And now you can get Bijan Robinson, who may just be a top 5 player in the entire draft. Come on. I think that's what they're going to do if he falls to number 26. But will he? Similar to some of these other players that have dropped in a little bit, I don't know. It's definitely the Eagles trading back from 10, somewhere in the teens, and then taking Bijan. That would be smart. Outside of him, maybe like the Lions, maybe they want another weapon, pair with DeAndre Swift. They lost Williams in free agency. I don't know. I think how the board is shaped out, I think Bijan has a good chance to fall to this type of range. Maybe the Cowboys trade up just a few spots to ensure they get him. But I think he's going to be a target. Keep him in Texas. I could definitely see it happening. And then at pick number 27 for the Buffalo Bills, they could go a lot of different options. They could go get some help on their offensive line. Anton Harrison, maybe help in the interior. Steve Avila, Luke Weipler. Good players, but I do think that they're going to replace who they lost in free agency in Tremaine Edmonds and go out and get Jack Campbell from Iowa. Another just absolute beast in the middle of anybody's defense. 6'5", 240 pounds, can run sideline to sideline. I think he fits exactly what the Bills need in their defense. And it does say that their needs is defensive back, but when you go to see who's on the board, are they really going to draft an Emmanuel Forbes or Cam Smith here? When last year they drafted a pretty similar prospect to those guys in Kaiir Elam. So are they going to do that again? I don't think that the value is really there for them to do that. I think Jack Campbell is their best pick to definitely continue to help them win now. I think he's a player that can step in right away and have an immediate impact next to Matt Milano. But here at number 28 for the Bengals, this is a very popular tight end spot as well. And I do think they're going to draft a tight end. I could see a Brian Brees or Nolan Smith or maybe even a Miles Murphy. I mean, these edge rushers, they've fallen pretty far down the board given their talent, their upside. So I could see the Bengals maybe getting another guy to help out their defensive line as a whole. But I do think also tight end is a nice pick here. I think Michael Mayer. He may be the best all-around tight end. He can block really well, and also catch the ball, good hands. He's not the most athletic guy, but he's a solid tight end. And I think at pick number 28, you get another target for Joe Burrow. Throw him in with the rest of that, incredible pass catching unit of Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd. Whatever you think about Joe Mixon, is he still what he was? I don't really think so, but are they really going to take a Jahmyr Gibbs here at number 28? I don't really see the Bengals doing that. I really do think it's a defensive lineman or a tight end. And then here at number 29 for the Saints, I think that their pick is going to be on either side of the offensive or defensive line. You got Derek Carr in free agency. They still have some decent weapons. They went out and got some targets last year. Chris Olave, Michael Thomas will be coming back. Still have Alvin Kamara. So I think either the offensive or defensive line is the selection here for the Saints. And I think they're going to go with Myles Murphy. And if you go back to last year, before the 2022 college football season took place, Myles Murphy was seen as maybe a potential top 10, top 5 pick. He kind of fell off a little bit this past year for Clemson, didn't have as much production. I think that scared teams a little bit. Maybe I'm underselling him just a bit, having him fall all the way down to number 29. Maybe he can go in the teens. But I think overall, this would be a really nice pick for the Saints. They did lose Marcus Davenport in free agency. Cameron Jordan's getting up there in age a little bit. They really need to help out their depth on their defensive line. Myles Murphy does that. Great upside. Maybe they can get more out of him, which he had, this first couple years of his college career. And then here at pick number 30 is the Philadelphia Eagles. And as I mentioned earlier in the draft, they really like to take trench players. It's just kind of their philosophy. But I do think they're going to take a running back with some pick in their first round. And with Bijan Robinson already off the board, Jahmyr Gibbs to the Eagles with pick number 30. Really, really interesting. But I think overall, with Miles Sanders leaving, they want to keep up that rushing attack. They didn't really replace him a ton. Maybe they trade out of this spot to some pick in the second round and pick him there and just get some more picks. Could be another trade down spot. But I think with him here on the board, just take him. And I think Jahmyr Gibbs fits really nicely with their offense. Definitely see Brian Brees or Nolan Smith going here. Just another trench player to help out that rotation, which was fantastic last year with all the guys they acquired: Ndamukong Suh, Robert Quinn, Hassan Reddick, Josh Sweat. There's so many guys to throw at offenses. But the last pick, the Chiefs could go a lot of different ways. Brian Brees, Nolan Smith, they're still on the board. Anton Harrison, still on the board. Maybe a receiver. I still don't really like it at the end of the first round. I think it's going to be one of these three players. If this is how the board falls out, I think it's going to be Brian Brees, Nolan Smith, or Anton Harrison. And I think that it is going to be Nolan Smith for the sake of this mock draft. They lost Frank Clark in free agency, and I think that they do need some help. They have George Karlaftis, who they drafted last year in the draft. Pair him really nicely with Nolan Smith. They still have Chris Jones on the interior. Maybe they get Brian Brees to pair with him. But I think for the sake of this mock draft, I think Nolan Smith, he's fallen way too far. I got to have him sneak into my first round. But this is what we're looking like. Let me know what you think about my mock draft. And if you like to add your team picking. And also let me know your hot draft take as we head in to the end of April. But thank you guys so much for watching the video. If you are new to the channel, be sure to subscribe, drop a like on the video. And as always, I will catch you guys in my next one.